All right, everyone. This is going to be the first of a series of lectures on Rome, as well as Han, China, and I should say actually the Qin and Han dynasties of China. We're first going to begin with a look at the Roman world from roughly the 8th century BCE all the way down to the 7th century CE. This is the time period from about the mythical founding of Rome, according to tradition, all the way down to the beginning of the early Middle Ages, the late antiquity to the early Middle Ages. First topic under consideration will be the Roman Republic, which we'll look at in two lectures. First, we need to make some comment about the geography of the Italian peninsula. Of course, the city of Rome itself is situated on the Italian peninsula on the Tyrrhenian Sea coast. It has more or less direct access to the Mediterranean Sea and the trade links and the resources that can be taken out of the sea, both in terms of food and other access to markets and so forth. The city of Rome is also situated on the Tiber River, so Rome isn't directly a coastal city. It will have its own port at Ostia, but it will also have sort of inland commercial and trade routes along the Tiber. The Alps Mountains protect Italy from in the north and provide defense. However, most of Italy is dominated by the sort of hilly arable land that runs down the center of the peninsula, the Apennine mountain region. The Mediterranean climate of the peninsula, like that of Greece, allows for a long growing season. However, the land itself is going to lend itself more to vineyards and to olive groves, as in Greece. So these will be important, high-value commodities for export. Foodstuffs, staple foodstuffs like wheat, will still have to be imported from around the Mediterranean to feed the increasing population of the city of Rome. And we can see the map here. All right, and the areas, the seas around each side of the peninsula, the Adriatic, the Tyrrhenian, the Ionian, the Alps in the north, and then the Apennines that sort of run down the center of Italy here. All right. The Sicily nearby. Okay. Roman origins. The legend, of course, and this is common. We've talked about this in class and so on and so forth. Is the establishment of the city by Romulus and Remus, who were the infants that were abandoned and washed up and nursed by the she-wolf. Romulus is considered the first king of Rome. Nevertheless, we can talk as much as we want about the legend, but the archaeological evidence suggests that the 7 hills around the Tiber River were settled as early as 1000 BCE. There were local inhabitants that shared in Latin culture that was more or less pervasive throughout central Italy. However, the region was politically dominated by Etruscans, that branch of the Celtic peoples in northern Italy. The Celts, of course, dominated most of Europe in the late Iron Age. Most of Central Europe, Gaul, what is modern Germany, even into Spain and certainly into Britain and Scotland and Ireland, where the remnants of the Celtic people remain today. But they had a North Italian confederation that were called the Etruscans, and they did have a kingly organization, a kingship, that ruled over many of the Latin-speaking peoples in central Italy. Of course, in the south, that was part of Greater Greece. Most of the cities down there in southern Italy and Sicily were originally Greek, or in some cases Phoenician foundations. In terms of the initial social structure, and we'll come back to this again and again. Wealthy landowners dominated the Latin peoples in towns and villages. We'll go on at length. And they formed a council of elders that would come to serve as an advisory committee to both the Tarquin kings, which we'll discuss in a moment, as well as the consuls when Rome establishes a republic. This council of elders was commonly called the Senate. And here we see the famous Etruscan bronze with the Romulus and Remus nursing from it. The she-wolf here, of course, these bronzes, these two male figures down here, were much later additions. Much later, they were actually added during the Renaissance. Okay. So the beginnings of the Republic. We talked about the kingdom period from 753 to 507. It's interesting, of course, to remember to note that 507 BCE, when the Republic of Rome is established, is right around the same time that Cleisthenes is establishing democracy or a new constitution in Greece. That happens in 508 BCE. So a little point of comparison there. Brutus, the Liberator, as he was known, led senatorial leadership to overthrow the last Tarquin king, or Etruscan king. They were sometimes called the Tarquins. His name was Tarquinius Superbus in 507. There was a bit of a public scandal in which there was the rumor or the reality that this individual, Tarquinius, or a member of his family, had raped a young Roman patrician woman, Lucretia. This incited the senatorial class to overthrow this tyranny of kingship. They did not want to have kings thereafter. Kings were a bad word in the city of Rome, and so they established instead a res publica, we in English would call a republic, in which officials are elected to carry out the will of those who elected them. Several assemblies were established in the city of Rome that represented most all Roman free citizens. However, the most important one was that which represented that senatorial class, that group of important elite individuals. And only patricians were eligible, elites were eligible to run for Senate and to vote for Senate. And so the Senate becomes this very important advisory council, both at first to the kings, but then later to the new executive leadership of Rome during the Republic. So after 507, the Senate serves as an advisory council to the consuls. However, to some extent, for the most of the long history of the Republic, the Senate does set policy and is responsible for governing the Republic, and so that the consuls will essentially take directives from the Senate. The Senate will be the ones who will appoint governors of provinces. And this system will work from about 500 all the way down to about the year 100 or 150 BCE, when, with the expansion of the Roman Republic, starts to put a burden on the Senate's ability to govern its affairs. And here we see the ruins of the Roman Forum, the meeting place like the Agora in Greece, and of course centrally located in this is the Arch of Constantine that we see there, that was built by that Roman emperor in the early 4th century CE. Roman society is what we might call in the West a traditional society or a patriarchal society. Probably better to not call it traditional, just simply to call it what it is, patriarchy, where men, both father figures, but men in general, run the social order. And so you have the patrician class, and you see that root word, patri, in there, that act as sort of father figures to the rest of society, particularly to those who are not wealthy landowners, the plebeians. And so throughout much of Roman history, the history of the Republic, there is great conflict between those who have and those who do not have as much. In some cases, plebeians can be quite wealthy. There were upper tiers of the plebeian class like the equestrians, who were most notable for their participation in military service, who could become quite wealthy. Yet early on, there were laws banning the marriage between patricians and plebeians, and it was only until those laws changed in and around after the year 100 BCE that plebeians did gain that right to vote, and there could be marriages between these two social orders, although those marriages will remain quite restricted. Nevertheless, it was the responsibility of the Roman patrician to take care of those who were lower down on the social ladder. Patricians were expected to pay for important public buildings, to provide for entertainment. And so there was a responsibility that came with wealth and power. Early on, patricians could basically do as they pleased. The rights of plebeians were quite restricted, and so the one element of reform in the Republic was the establishment of the 12 Laws, which restrained the overpowering influence of the patrician class. Eventually, you would see the development of positions, power positions, like the tribune, the position of tribune, which was specifically designated for plebeians, so that plebeians could elect their own to those particular offices and be represented by them. Another element of Roman society is the paterfamilias. This is the one in which the father is the head of the family. The father or some other designee, so if the father is no longer living, a brother, an eldest son, but is nevertheless the most prominent male member of the society, whoever is the head of the family, will have the greatest say, and their word is as good as law. Okay? And so much in the same way as patricians, we should say, put the cart before the horse here, the way in which the father runs the family is the same way in which the patrician runs society. Okay, so we'll see that this sort of paterfamilias ideology, which will be expanded during the Roman Empire in terms of its influence and its prestige. This idea of paterfamilias is really the core of what makes the Roman state work. The patron-client relationship is another derivative of that, where you have a patron, a powerful, wealthy individual, who seeks support of various clients in exchange for gifts and favors. So a client provides a senator with political support, campaigns for them, actively goes out and does things for them. And in return for that, the patron, if a job comes up or a court case needs to be ruled upon for that client, the patron will rule favorably or will provide that individual with a job, let's say in working for the prefect or the tax collection office or working on the roads and bridges in the town. So this is sort of the mechanism that makes Roman society work, and therefore creates a system of dependence between the patricians and the plebeians. They need one another to make society work, to make their own particular ambitions fully realized. We said before, because of the paterfamilias, women were subordinated in this patriarchal society. They would most always be second to the prominent male member of their household. However, there are cases in which women can exert influence, in which they can, in managing the home, convince their husband that certain thing is right or wrong or so forth. However, the one thing that really does happen is sometimes women are left in wills. They are the kind of the natural successor to the estate, and therefore can gain economic freedom over their male relatives by being left a vineyard or an orchard of some kind of land, some kind of property from which income can be derived. And that will establish their own independence. Finally, there's the sense of Roman society. Roman society was, Roman society in relationship to the gods, and that was that the Romans preferred to ensure that all the gods were honored in what was called the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods, so that all gods were represented, all gods were fairly happy, and no one got too angry, and bad things happened to Rome.